I'm Rob Licuria, Senior Editor at Gold Derby here with Alex Summers and Scott Alario. Guys, the score for the Nickel Boys has a uniquely experimental sound, blending acoustic elements, unconventional tape loops, raw samples. How did you both decide on this collage style approach, and what impact do you think it has on the audience's experience?
Thank you. Thanks for listening to the score, and thanks for chatting with us today. We didn't really decide on anything. It's just kind of how we move through the world, and we love listening. We love collecting sounds. We love collaging stuff. We love using samplers and the acoustic instrument palette. I think Scott and I relate to electronic musicians a lot more than acoustic, but we don't use synthesizers or electronics really. We just use acoustic instruments, but we treat them very much like the way electronic musicians like treat their sounds and mangle things. So I think it's just how we like to build music is treating it like clay and just recording stuff and playing around, and the kind of the sound of the music is as important as the notes. So Ramel, the director of this movie, kind of let us do that. And I think he was curious to see where we would land. And there was a bit of back and forth, but yeah, we just leaned into the kind of patient, durational, very beautiful camera work of this movie and paired it with music that was slow and textural. And we thought it was a natural way to approach it, really, for us.
Scott, anything to add?
Yeah. Yeah. And the second part of your question was it about how the audience might have be affected or yeah, I
Yeah,
think it's
yeah.
like I'm never really sure how an audience will interpret a work or yeah, or how they'll be affected by it. But I think for Alex and I, we were affected by our own music, kind of like we get really into it when we're making music together and we're kind of lost in it. And I think we're transported to another place or we're very yeah, kind of just immersed in it. So it's a little bit hard for me to say, but I think that it's a cool pairing. I think it's like very different in a way. I think Ramel Ross, the director, had done a documentary film before this, and he used some of our music as well for that. And I think when we saw the combination of our kind of small textural pieces, sound collage pieces with his visuals that are, what one might imagine as being quite opposite, where it just was a cool pair.
I want to pick up on that because I know a lot of your work, both of your work from, working with Junzi and Sigur Rós, and of course as the Parachutes. So I'm very familiar with that avant-garde style of music, your musicianship. But to me, a lot of your music was really internalized, and I used to always really take it in, and it was a very internal approach, maybe with headphones. And I feel like this film suits your style so perfectly, given that the point of view is the audience through the eyes of these two young men. I just wonder if that was something that was really playing on your mind when you came together to create this score, that it was going to be a very internalized emotional experience.
Yeah, well, thanks again for saying that, and thanks for listening over the years. I think we didn't really, when we read the script, it talks about this point of view thing. And Scott and I were lucky enough to visit the set in New Orleans where they were filming and kind of get a little taste for it. But we didn't exactly realize what that would look like until we saw the film, because it's hard to read it on the page and understand because there's so many different ways Ramel and the team could have done point of view. But once we saw it, I think it encouraged us to lean into the kind of slow durational music. It didn't need to say a lot in a short period of time. We felt that it could kind of unfold more slowly and yeah, just be a little more ambient and dreamy, based on the kind of experiential nature of the way the film is shot. And it's kind of a little more like you're living in it. And when you move through your own life and you hear the world, things don't necessarily have to make sense in a literal way. And that felt cool to us that we could lean into that. Yeah, Scott, I feel like you've spoken about this. You have a good understanding of the POV translated to music.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was like Alex said, like once we saw it, it made sense. But I think one really cool thing about working with Ramel is that he really wanted us to do our own thing and kind of just like dig into it really deeply, like what we do together. And he kind of gave us a lot of space for that. And then we would make a lot of music not to picture. And send it to him, and he would come back maybe with an edit or some ideas, and we'd go back and forth. And eventually we did work more to picture, but I think at first we were just kind of like kind of doing our own thing, like making a record if we were just going to be putting out music together or something like that. It felt kind of more like that at first. And then of course it became more like film scoring once we saw more. But at first I don't think we were really thinking of the first person perspective at all. At least I wasn't, but I was so pleased to see the film. We got to see it in a room that had amazing sound in New York, and it was so cool to like hear it and feel, and you do feel like you're inside of a head in a way.
Absolutely. I think it's really important for people to see this film in a cinema because the sound is so critical to really immersing yourself in what these young men were experiencing. And I think I think your score actually really hit me the most when Elwood is arriving at Nickel Academy. It's this horrifying horror, like it was this emblematic of the dread and isolation and helplessness that they were feeling. And I'm just wondering what instrumentation, Alex, did you rely on or deploy to really make the audience feel so helpless and alone, just like he would have been feeling?
Yeah, that cue in particular is probably the most visceral kind of dread-filled cue in the film. And it started very simply of just a two-note theme on a Wurlitzer, and then it got really crazy based on a few field recordings that Scott made of, I'll let Scott take over, but I'll just tell you the raw field recordings was like a tap dancer, just totally fucked and slowed down and destroyed in post-processing, and some brass instruments that were also kind of treated to hell. But yeah, Scott, you should share more about the audio collage on those field recordings that you did.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, Alex had this really cool, very kind of like haunting tone on the Wurlitzer that I had a sample of that, or I had that in my library or something, and I was listening to it and then just kind of playing around really, and maybe responding to the feeling. It's like through a space echo. So it's very the tone of the Wurlitzer is kind of like stretched out and just, yeah, it gave me this really strange off feeling. And then yeah, like he said, I put in some tap dancing and some brass and just played around with it. And I think at first that was kind of an earlier piece that we worked on. And I think before we had maybe read the screenplay, or it was like around that time, but I think like we weren't really sure what Ramel would want in a way. And I was still thinking maybe he would want us to make like a horror film score, or maybe there would be like really dark aspects from our music. And it was just trying out something really different for us because we don't really make stuff that sounds that way, or we hadn't. And even though there is like heaviness and somberness and darkness to a lot of the pieces we made, I think like this one is a bit more chaotic and frenetic and psychotic. And yeah, I was so excited when I was placed to that scene, and we were like, I had to kind of bite my tongue or something and not be like, please, like, let that make the final cut or something. Because like when I saw it, I was just so excited that arrival at Nickel. And it sounds silly to say something excited about something because it is a terrible moment in the film and it is like horrifying sounds and it's awful and like you feel kind of sick to your stomach, but excited because yeah, that weird piece of music we made together was going to be
It captures like dread and being really upset in a really sincere way. It's not cheapo. It doesn't kind of score the drama of it. It's really internal and like upsetting, almost like panic attacky. But yeah, it's cool. It's a cool moment. Yeah, thanks for calling that one out.
Yeah, it's a lot of the score is not I don't know how else to put it, but it's not self-conscious. It felt very organic to me. Like another example, I don't want to spoil it, but towards the end, there's a more triumphant, cautiously triumphant track when the two guys are cycling. Again, you don't create motifs or cues for certain characters or certain moments, but it just felt very true. So final question, we really don't have much time, but the final question is when you have to mix it up with that kind of tone without foreshadowing, is that a really hard thing to get right?
Yeah, it is. It's hard. And I think if we would have scored this film the way I've scored any other film or the way any other director would have asked their composer to work, it would have had that foreshadowing. It would have had those themes. It would have had all these hallmarks of a great film score. but every time Scott and I started to lean in that direction, Ramel would just gently let those cues fall away, or those ideas. He wasn't mean about it, but it wasn't the movie he was making. So we had to find a way to achieve what we wanted to, but in the most unprescriptive way possible. And it just required us to keep experimenting, keep trying things, and make music that felt true to us, authentic, and that would somehow match the on-screen experience, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Final word to you, Scott.
No, I just would agree with that fully. Yeah, it was tricky, and yeah, what Alex said for sure.
Thank you guys for your time today. We'll bring you back shortly for the group panel.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.